Alright, so this little gem got sent to me about a week ago. I haven't had a chance to get to it the way I'd like, so hopefully I can get through it today and capture all the things that are jumping off the page. So this is just a road stop that happened in Victoria just recently, and so we're going to go over it piece by piece. Before I do, I'm just going to set up the understanding of what a particular way of seeing reality is, and it's the most common one on the planet. It's the biggest religion on the planet, and it's called statism, and I'm going to have Mark define it for you. So here we go.
Statism is the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, imprison, harass, steal from, and kill people so that we can be protected from people who kidnap, harass, steal from, and kill people. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense if you ask me. I think it's going to work out brilliantly with that system in place.
Okay, so if you're religious, in some level, and I'm even going back to, believing in stuff in the Bible, etc., and having that as your sort of code to live by, that kind of religion, even if you don't go to church, etc., you might see the image of this figure, which some would identify as a real living being that actually happened, and you might get offended. And you see the word anarchist. That's probably one of the reasons you're getting offended, because you have particular ideas of what an anarchist is, which is the way it's been presented to us. It's people who throw Molotov cocktails and want to destroy some kind of organised structure where there can be peace and harmony on the planet. That's probably why you're getting offended. If you're actually believing that's the true meaning of anarchism, it just means that you've been brainwashed. So the further we go along, if you're still here, it's actually going to be defined to you what an anarchist really is, its true definition. But now, hopefully, I'm going to get into the road stop, and so we can take a look at that.
No, mate. What's your name?
I'm
Dean McGuire.
Yeah.
Are you from Victoria Police, obviously?
Sorry?
You're from Victoria Police, obviously?
Yes, I'm from Victoria Police.
And that's an office of public service, or is it a private
I work for
corporation?
Victoria Police, produce your driver licence and state your full name and address,
Are
please.
you...
So already, straight away, he's not looking at him when he asked if the driver. And I was going to get offended saying, you're not a driver. I'm not going to split hairs here. The one recording the video asked him a question, he looks away. So you'll see this pattern over and over again.
Are you for a public office or private corporation, mate?
I work for Victoria Police.
Do you notice he never answers the question by looking at his face when he says he works for Victoria Police? He's been asked if he's a public servant and he looks away. If you want to see an admission of guilt, you'll see this happen over and over again. So you'll see this pattern. It just keeps happening over and over again.
I work for Victoria Police.
So you showed me once when he actually looks him in the face, like at the camera, when he answers the question.
Is it a public office? Are you a public servant?
I work for Victoria Police.
There you go, now he finally did it, but he won't answer the question.
Give your driver licence.
Answer the question.
I'm not going to play games with you, mate.
Answer the question.
Just produce your driver's licence.
Why, sure.
Because you're driving a motor vehicle.
Are you a public servant, mate?
Well, if you think I'm a public servant, I'm a public
Answer the
servant.
question, mate.
I work for Victoria Police.
Are you a public servant? I don't have to do anything you say, mate, if you're from a private corporation.
I'm not from a private corporation.
Victoria Police is not a private corporation.
No, it's not.
This has been recorded, mate, for evidence, so...
Yeah, that's alright, I'm recording as well.
So you're a public servant?
Okay, so if he was recording, his camera there will be flashing red, just so we're clear.
Yes or no?
I work for Victoria Police.
Are you a public servant, mate?
Victoria Police.
If you're not a public servant, I'm just going to drive home, mate.
Well, you're not going to drive home.
Why?
Because you're required to produce your driver's licence and state your full name and address you're driving a motor
You
vehicle.
need to answer the question, mate. Are you a public servant? What's your name, mate?
Livingston, Newcastle, Lawrence, Carver?
Are you both from Geelong Station?
No.
No.
Where from?
State Highway Patrol.
State Highway Patrol. And are you a public servant or not?
I'm a police officer,
Are you a public servant?
I guess.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So what is your oath? Your oath,
Mate.
your oath of public service, mate.
Where's your driver's license, mate?
What's your oath of public service, mate?
I'm not required to tell you.
You are. If you're claiming
No.
to be a public servant, yes,
Well,
you are.
what
Mate.
act does it say that I need to tell you?
What act?
I've identified myself as a police officer to you. You obviously clearly can see that. I've asked
Are
you
you?
to produce your driver's license.
Victoria Police is a private corporation, mate. It's not an
It's
office
not,
of
mate.
public service. Are you saying that?
Well,
to
how
me?
about this? You just produce your driver's license, figure it out. You can fill out the back and take it to court.
I'm not doing anything you asked me to, mate. If you're not even a public servant.
Okay.
You're driving a motor car, mate. You need to produce your licence.
Okay, you
state
need to
your full
answer
name
the
and
question. I
address.
don't need to do anything you asked me to. If you're
Well, if you don't do it, you're just going to be arrested and taken back to the police station.
mate, you're,
Right, we have a power of arrest.
You're the one breaking the law here. Mate.
We have a
one
power of
breaking the
arrest
law
under the
here.
Road Safety Act. If you don't, tell us who you
You're
are.
the one
We don't know
breaking
who
the
you
law
are.
here, mate. Are you a public servant? Yes or no?
Well, if you say I'm a public servant,
I'm not
a public
saying. I'm
servant.
asking a question, mate. If you're
I think
a
I've
public
told you 10
servant,
times I work for Victoria Police.
is that an office of public service or not?
It's Victoria Police.
Is it yes or no? You know the answer.
It's Victoria
You know
Police.
the answer is why you don't want to answer it, don't you?
There's nothing to answer.
You know the answer. You know the answer, don't you?
You're under arrest.
How about, mate?
That's it. Let's go. You're under arrest. Family mistake.
Okay, so there you saw it, right? Outright obfuscation. So those people who actually still believe there's such a good thing as a police officer, someone can be a police officer and be a moral man. I'd like to see how you're going to justify that, right? Wouldn't even answer the question of whether he's a public servant. Now, you've seen me do other videos before where I've shown you where others have been asked if they're public servants and standing under the oath of office, and this one incident, they ran away, right? So there's plenty of evidence these people know they're actually acting criminally. I'm going to get back into the whole thing about using the avoidance of responsibility by saying that what act, show me the act that says I have to, right? We're going to get back into that later. For now, I just wanted to show you this is the standard operating procedure of people who are supposedly there to protect and serve the people by doing what? People who've committed no crime, right? They won't even admit whether they're acting under the oath of office of a public servant. They will just outright avoid that. And just stick with the same narrative of working for Victoria Police while denying that it's a private corporation. So it's either it's either something that's there to serve the public, or it's there as a private organisation. It can't be anything else. It's got to be one or the other, right? And if they won't admit that they're under public office, then by just default, it makes it a private organisation they're working for. So that's really, really important to understand that, right? You're given multiple evidence here of how just every question, every time it was launched, the question about public service was totally avoided, right? Now, a public servant, that would be an absolute crime for them to do that. To be someone who's in service of the public and then not answer questions to the people you're in service of, that's an absolute crime, right? So you can see right there that they're not answerable to the public, right? It's showing you. So now we're going to go into statism a little bit more, defining, with a bit more definition, and that one I showed you about Jesus.
So a statist is an individual who erroneously believes there's such a thing as authority that is vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority means that certain people who we call government have the, quote, moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction, and that their subjects or slaves have a, quote, moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates or laws, quote unquote, that are set by their masters. Most simply put, a statist is nothing more than someone who believes in the legitimacy of slavery. Conversely, an anarchist, a true anarchist anyway, is one who knows that there could never be legitimacy to authority or government, because those terms are simply euphemisms for violence and slavery and coercion, which are always immoral and in opposition to natural law.
So hopefully that's giving you some understanding, if you haven't got it already, about the type of thinking that someone needs to employ, the toxic way to see reality, to do what these guys did. Now, if you look at them as just males in a costume that's big and puffy with a lot of implements of violence on there, that you can see are just part of some private gang, right, like a street gang, if you can understand that's what they are, right, would you walk past them and just think, oh yeah, they got legitimate right to pull people over? Would you think that, right? So this is the mind trick that's in play, right? It's a mass delusion that the majority of the population are under. They cannot see reality as it actually functions because of the level of lies that they're willing to accept and avoid the actual truth they know deep in their hearts. Every individual has this capacity to access this truth, yet they sadly have learnt that survival requires them to suppress that. That's a choice that each individual makes, right? And that's what this is ultimately about, is how many people would see this road stop and just go, oh yeah, the one that's been pulled over, they deserve it because they've done something wrong, right? That's the immediate default thinking that happens. Otherwise, if this was you seeing this as just some street gang pulling someone else over, right, we'd just think the same thing, right? Or we'd just sit there going, okay, we need to stop this. That's the difference. It's all about the trick in the mind. So now we're going to go back into it a little more.
Who carried out the Holocaust in Germany? The people who followed their orders to do it. That's who carried it out. Order followers is the answer. Who carried out the purge of political dissidents in Soviet Russia? Order followers. And they're always in the form of police. Why do you think they call a totalitarian system a police state? Why don't they call it a banker state? How come they don't call it a politician state? What about a lawyer state? How about a judge state? Why not call it any of those things? You want to know why? Because none of those people are ultimately responsible for bringing that condition into manifestation through their behavior. They're the order givers. The order followers carry out their commands and through their behavior make that condition a reality. That's why it's called a police state. Because every police state that has ever existed has always been created by police who follow their orders because they don't want to take responsibility and think for themselves and know the difference between right and wrong for themselves like an adult. Instead, I want to be a child who obeys daddy because I have daddy issues. All right? And that's what it's really about, folks.
So there you have it. Ultimately, the psychology of someone who's drawn into want to become one of these order followers, right? There has to be something deficient about them. Ultimately, if there's a real deep digging of why someone would want to dominate and control someone else, right? And believe that's a legitimate thing to do. So there's so many people I still see make excuses for that. We need protection, yada yada. Yet they are lacking the fundamental understanding of how reality really works. And that's why they sadly, when I say fundamental lack of understanding, I'm going to rephrase that actually. They deny their knowing of how reality really works. They deny it as opposed to lack the understanding. They suppress that, right? Because each one of us has or is conscience, right? We are conscience and we're just embodied in a physical manifested form. And that can never be taken from us. That's who we are. That's inherently who we are. And that's that intuitive knowing we have about how reality really works. And so you need to suppress that in order to start believing there's such a thing as legitimacy of one man's having authority over another. Just because some people say, yeah, I like you to be my master and ruler, that doesn't actually make that legitimate. And so these men who stand in these uniforms, this is what they make themselves believe. Right, but there has to be something seriously deficient about them to do that, right? There's got to be some aspect of them that really feels inadequate deeply and is craving some kind of external validation from a group that's going to embrace them and make them one of theirs. All that kind of separation thinking, right? There's some deeply traumatized people who come and take on these positions, and they're the ones you're going to entrust your protection to, right? I don't know who needs to really think about this deeper, the people who accept it or the people who do it. It's pretty much the same. I'd say it'd be the same, really. There'd be no less or greater burden on either. It'd be about the same. And so if we don't understand this, if we don't really take the time and care to understand this, people don't want to learn the truth as it exists, this kind of condition is going to keep going on. And, usually until it happens to you, that most people don't care. So sadly, what I'm going to say here is a lot of people who have gone through this still don't understand the principles of morality at its core. They still bend and twist it based on certain biases and prejudices. They still hold that they haven't investigated. And that's the point of the videos I make, is to get down to the raw essence of where the truth lies. Not because it favours me or anyone else, because that's just because of what it is. And it requires a willingness to want to dig into that to understand why I do so many about the police. Because at the core of it, no violence could happen on an organised level if it wasn't an organised gang of people conducting it. It can't happen. So politicians, all the things you don't like that's happening on the planet, this is their protection racket. Without these guys doing what they do, the whole thing falls apart. But for them to do what they do, they need to be supported by every member of the community, because there's way more of us than there is of them. So ultimately it comes down to the people witnessing them that need to be able to see reality, how it functions. And if you're not at that place, then you're going to still be part of the problem of your own suffering and the suffering of the people you say you love. So now we're going to dig it into it a little more, go back into the specifics of what was being said.
Where's your driver's license, mate?
What's your oath of public service, mate?
I'm not required to tell you.
You are. If you're claiming to be a public servant, yes, you are.
What act does it say that I need to tell you?
So there you go. He says what act, right? So now he's already avoiding responsibility as someone who's carrying a weapon, right? And here's the thing about that, right? As soon as you hold more power than somebody else, what's that saying? How does it go? It's something like, with great power comes great responsibility. So immediately, just for the sheer fact he's got a weapon that can take someone's life, right? That immediate puts a lot more responsibility on his shoulders than the average individual. So everyone who says that they're just like us, that's not true. We don't possess, each individual does not possess a big monolith that comes at their beck and call when they decide they want to crush somebody. These guys do. So that's an entirely different level of responsibility. That's why they're required to take an oath. So they're responsible for having that level of power. And when they deny that they're a public servant, that means that I don't want to take any responsibility for what I'm about to do to you. I refuse to do that. And they have to do a lot of mental gymnastics, and one of them is the legislation doesn't say I have to, right? So that's avoiding his personal responsibility, but he's the one conducting the action. He's performing it, no one else but him. So if you're performing it, there's no such thing as you getting to palm that responsibility off onto anyone else, right? The Milgram experiment proved that how many people are willing to do that, but that doesn't actually make it true or correct. That doesn't defy the laws of nature, how it works, right? The fact that they're actually performing it, that means the karma and the consequences, they're the ones who are responsible for, right? And it's not until we start seeing reality like that and speaking to these individuals like that. And if you're a family member of one of these people and you don't understand that and you're not starting to speak to them like that, then you're denying what your conscience already knows, right? So then you're defying yourself, you're defying the truth. That means you're part of your own suffering and the suffering of other people. That's how reality works. That's why we all have a responsibility to speak the truth. Because if we don't, we're all part of our own misery and the misery of other people we say we love. Right? And you compound that by millions and billions of people, then you have what we have now, just organised misery. Yet we're still looking outward for the problem, but the problem exists within us for denying what we truly know. Right? Now you heard him do that. You saw him deflect and say that he's not responsible because it's written on a bunch of paper created by the most immoral people on the planet, which are political parasites, right? And he's going to use that as some kind of justification. That's what they do. Now the bald guy, he'll do the same.
Well, if you don't do it, you're just going to be arrested and taken back to the police station.
See? Is that not coercion? Right there. That's a threat to violence, right? So there's already immediate duress, saying if you don't do what I say and what my buddy says, this is what's going to happen to you. Right? We need to see it for how it is. They don't actually possess any more authority than you or I do, right? And our authority is only with ourselves. It's not to get other people to do anything we want. But here he is. There's the delusion, the statist mentality, right? There's the sickness that's embedded itself in the mind. Here it is. This is what mental illness does. Now, how many people really see it for that? That it's a mental illness, that they've been infected with a mind virus they refuse to do anything about. Right? And you'll hear what he says, where his power comes from.
We have a power of arrest.
You're the one breaking the law here.
We have a power of arrest under the Road Safety Act.
So there he did. He quoted it again. So now he believes, just because something's written on paper, that he can now be super mortal and be, absolved of any personal responsibility for violating the laws of nature, right? You know, the 7 transgressions. I've done videos on that, of natural law. He gets to violate that and be totally unaccountable. That's what he actually has convinced himself that he has the power to do, right? Now you show me one individual that has the power to do that, right? But somehow you put on this paramilitary uniform, you get indoctrinated by your cult masters, and then all of a sudden this is actually correct in reality, right? So here's what we need to really start understanding, right? Is where it happens at the street level on day to day. We are surrounded by this kind of belief. It is actually destroying the foundations of any kind of social cohesion, any kind of possibility for peace. These guys are your domestic terrorists, right? They are terrorizing the local population. That is their role. So how anyone can say that these people don't know what they're doing, I'd love to see you show me how they can actually, why they're not looking people in the face when they're answering questions. Because if they were really honest, they'd look you right in the eyes every time you asked a question and they'd answer it. They wouldn't deny, dismiss, and obfuscate. That's not what an honest person does, unless you have a different definition of honesty, right? But I'm going by the one that I've seen and that most people that I've met agree with. So here it is right in front of you, who these people really are and what they're willing to do in order to keep doing the thing that actually is criminal, right? So here you have criminals who have taken an oath so they can be criminals. But the oath that they're supposed to take is one where they own up to the personal responsibility for every action they take. That's why it's an individual office, right? They are personally responsible for their actions. And a conscious being would know that, one who's fully aware. Not these ones who actually, are just desperate for approval and acceptance from some kind of pseudo family that they've invented in their minds care about them. And that's why the sickness continues, because the population thinks the same way. And it isn't until we break that mind spell, this is going to keep continuing. So I'm just going to play another clip.
I made this meme and put it up on Facebook. And it had politicians on the left that said, my actions, underlined and capitalized, didn't cause that. And then there was some soldiers or Marines, whatever they are, order followers on the right side, and they're also saying the same statement. My actions didn't cause that. And then at the bottom, I just put this question. Oh, I'm sorry. Looks like, oh, I'm sorry. At the top, I put this question. Who is lying and who is telling the truth? So who's lying here? And if people can't see, I hope that they can see this horrific picture. This is the result of, bombings that took place in the Middle East around Iraq. And it's a father carrying his dead child in his arms. Okay? Maybe if bombs were raining down on our children, we might think differently about going in and waging imperialism on other nations. I don't know. Maybe we might think differently about it. Right? But when it happens to somebody else's child, that's okay. That's done in the name of freedom. Okay? Well, who caused this? Did they cause it? No, they didn't cause it. They are not the actual cause of this. Because you know what all they did? They signed some pieces of paper, wearing their expensive suits, okay? And they told these guys, they said, well, you're under our orders now. Go and bomb these people. And you know what these people did? Say, yes, sir, and go and drop the bombs. And fire off the ammunition. Okay? These are the people whose actions create things like this, not these people. All they're doing is speaking into somebody else's ear. All they've done is speech. Speech, not actions. See, again, really look. My actions didn't cause that. Yes, it is. If these people are saying my actions didn't cause that, they're lying. Very, very, very painful and difficult thing for people to comprehend and accept.
So this is critical. Now, I'm hoping by now it's all been made really clear as to how reality actually works, right? There's a difference between giving the order. It still makes you morally responsible, absolutely. Yet the whole word karma actually means action. So the way reality works, the way the universe is structured, it's beyond your control and mine. But whatever actual action you take has the biggest impact on how reality happens. And so those who physically take that action, which was those two criminals right there with the paramilitary uniforms and the inverted pentagrams on their shoulder, That's what Victoria Police symbolises. They show you right in your face who they are and who they work for and what they're willing to do to keep getting their money, their fake money out of the dog bowl that their masters keep feeding them. It shows you right there who took the action versus to who gave the order. Which one actually creates the result of the harm? That's where the burden of responsibility goes. And being that we are conscious beings, keep messing that word up, there's nothing that can take that power of knowledge away. No matter how many drugs, how many perverse things you get involved in, it will not take it away, because the sheer fact that you keep, if you're one of these order followers, that you keep conducting yourself in that way is going to motivate you to keep concealing that from your conscience by, copious amounts of alcohol, illicit drugs, getting into perverse behaviours, all these things you do on the side that you conceal from the public, right? That's going to keep feeding that. It's going to make it worse and worse. And you cannot get away from the truth of what you actually did with your actions. That just impregnates in your conscience, and it's burnt and stamped into your soul's memory. Right? And it's until we start speaking to them like that, with that real power of speaking the truth as it is, they will keep doing it. Because if more and more people speak like that, you will watch the sheer terror and panic in their eyes. Because they're just men like you and I. They're no different. That weapon and stuff they carry, it's totally meaningless, because it's the level of consciousness of that individual that actually decides what happens with those weapons. And it isn't until we use our power to speak to them like that and let them know, what do you actually produce? You do not produce an actual thing, but you are actually violating those people who do produce, that are productive, that use their labour to creating wealth for themselves and for others. And you do that, you use your force, violent force, to steal that from them under duress, under pain of punishment. That's your job, because it says so on someone else's piece of paper, who is totally immoral, and you probably disagree with many of the things in their behaviours, but yet here you are, you're willing to do it. And your conscience cannot escape that, right? The sheer fact that you refuse to look me in the eye when I ask you a direct question is evidence of you knowing that. That's the guilt of your conscience concealing itself, right? And you speak to them like that, watch what happens. Now, if you're at that level of courage where you actually want to be an honest, honourable human being that actually speaks from the soul, then there's places you can go that it has evidence of the correct structure, how it's meant to be, and how we use it in a way that brings down this entire tyrannical, superimposed tyrannical structure that has, usurped the true nature of how freedom can function when people are honest and dignified and come from their conscience, right? If that's where you're at, you are ready to really action that, because if you don't, then you'll fall what we have. All those other versions using UCC and maritime admiralty law, that's all part of giving to the same structure, because the criminals invented it. If you're using it to get out, then you're actually feeding that same structure. But there is only one way the truth happens. There's no other. That's why it's a line. It's a straight line. It doesn't deviate. It's permanent. It can't be removed. If you have the courage to actually stand for that and put your energy behind that, then this is where I recommend you go and start really learning and then actioning. Okay, so if you're looking to find some kind of guidance about moral principle, and that there is actually a structure in place that was built on moral principle, where the system of governance, which just means system of public servants and administration of how services will be delivered to the people equitably in order to advance the quality of all lives equally. This site has got plenty on it. I'm just going to quickly, I'm not going to go too much into it because I've done plenty of other videos about that. But here we go, it's already standing on principle. You can see that, unifying our community. It talks about the 1901 Australia Crime Punishment Manifesto, which is the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. So it talks about why that's a fraud and how that's just more enslavement. And then you've got participate in our police letter campaign. If you want to do that, you can click on that, take you right there. Subscribe to the mailing list. As you go back up here, you can see all the different places you can look into. And so anyway, that's for you to discover in your own time, but just giving you a resource, it's Magna Carta 1215.com. There you go.